normally our chairperson, Ina Pinkney, would be here, but she is traveling now from New York back to Chicago, so she wasn't able to be here. So John McFarlane and I it takes two people to fill in for her. So we're going to kind of fill in for her at this particular meeting. And one of the things we wanted to talk about was the fact that we're an advocacy group. We're promoting advocacy. We would like you all to be advocates. And in order to be advocates, of course, you need to be well informed and you need to be properly informed. And there's lots of things going on that we're hearing about post-polio syndrome, and some of them are true and some of them are not true. Even in the media, some of it, they don't get it right. So we thought we would tackle as a discussion here, we would tackle some of those myths or truths that are going on out there and just have a discussion about it, led by John, but everybody is welcome to join in on this discussion. And by the way, if you're new to our group and you're not in our mailing list, please add your contact information in the chat and we'll add you to the mailing list. We have about 270 members at this point and growing every day. So I am going to kind of take the role of the person that would be non-informed, and John's going to take the role of the advocate. And John's information is based on his years of research. I don't think he professes to be an expert in any one particular area, but he is very knowledgeable in the general aspects of post-polio syndrome. And so I'm going to start this process now. And the first point I want to make is, my doctor told me that PPS is not real. He said it's just a symptom of getting older. John, is that a truth or a myth?
It's a myth. It's a myth in a lot of circumstances. We really have to go back to what PPS is, where it comes from. PPS is a further breakdown of the neurons which control your muscles. Now, when you get polio, the acute polio, you land up with a situation where it detects the neurons and the anterior horn. And if you actually go back to the original Greek meaning of the words where poliomyelitis comes from, it means gray matter, which means it attacks your spinal cord and your brain. Now, not everybody gets it right the way throughout and going right the way through. But PPS is a well-diagnosed disease or condition these days, but I'm not sure if Carol's with us or not. As Carol will reinforce, PPS is a diagnosis of exclusion. So when you go along and when you go along to your doctor, you turn around and say, I had polio, or you may not even know you had polio, and you may have to find out that you had polio, which can be done as well. And you go through, and it's a bit like Sherlock Holmes. When you find out that everything else has been excluded, PPS is the only possible answer. Now, at one stage, they turned around and said that you had to have paralytic polio to get PPS. That is not actually the case these days. There are people who have had, and are being diagnosed now, who have had what was called, and what is called, asymptomatic polio. That means they may land up with something like flu-like symptoms, or they may just get a general malaise and weakness of a limb, and it recovers. There are many cases being diagnosed these days in Europe, and there is a study undergoing in the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, where they are looking at siblings of people with paralytic polio, and they are actually taking tests on them, and they're actually going through, and they're discovering that some of these siblings who showed no signs of paralytic polio had asymptomatic polio and are now developing PPS. The other thing for your information is that the World Health Organization has actually recognized post-polio syndrome. I can't remember its brand new derivation, but it was called ICD-10 G14. ICD-10 stood for the International Classification of Diseases, and G14 was the actual category that it came under. And polio in the ICD books is the only condition which has 3 entries: acute poliomyelitis, then polio sequelae, or basically what you and I would call the plateau phase, and then post-polio syndrome. So it's not a myth. And if your doctor says it's a myth, you want to sort of refer them back to their books and say to them that, you know, it's under this classification, it's been done. And we get many cases turning around and saying it, and I land up giving them the answer. There's the classification, there it is, there's the link, tell them to go and have a look, and it goes from there. And we have to educate doctors who deny. There are also countries who deny as well. For a long time, Spain, for example, denied that post-polio syndrome existed. For a long time, there was also denial in Mexico and in some of the other Central American countries.
Thank you, John. And if your doctor says it's not real, maybe it's time to find a new doctor, huh?
Yes. Can be a bit difficult in certain parts these days.
Div, you have your hand up? Two? No? Okay.
Yes, I had. Thank you very much. I want to confirm what John has said and relate to personal experiences I've had. I was suffering from similar symptoms to what I had as a young boy, and was ultimately admitted to Pretoria Academic Hospital, where a team of neurologists under a very famous guy that's now in the United States called Ben Lotz, Prof. Lotz, and his assistant, Christo Kutsia. When I was admitted, spent a week with me, mostly doing electromyograms, conductivity testing, under various conditions, either cold, heat, and anesthesia, different ways of doing it, blocking nerves, and finally general anesthesia. And other than what is commonly believed that it was an exclusion, this was aimed directly at proving exactly what we have been saying. So after a week of testing, what he told me was that, you know, you are suffering from what we call post-polio syndrome. You are experiencing weaknesses in the areas that you did when you were a child. I've confirmed that with the tests that I did, and he physically boarded me from a very interesting job I had at that point in time, because he said I was finally going to end up in a wheelchair. And I suppose what I really want to say, it's a physical test. It was a physical examination and a final conclusion. So it can be done if there's a will to it. Ben Lotz, if I'm not mistaken, is I'm not sure if he's still actively involved, but he's in the Mayo Clinic. And certainly Christo Kutsia, his assistant, and the rest of them took on the job of promoting and advocating post-polio syndrome. So it's a fact. It happens. It can be tested for. You don't have to exclude all these others. You can if you want to, but in this case, it was quite firmly diagnosed through conductivity testing.
Well, thank you, Deb. Those are excellent points. Bob, hold on to your question right at the moment, okay? Because what we'd like to do is have a discussion after we go through all the myths, so and truths. So if you could just hold on to it, and we'll have a discussion period once we get through all these, so we can get through some of them. So John, I got a friend who has BPS, and he says he doesn't want it to get worse, but he was told that there's nothing that can be done about it. Is that a myth or a truth?
PPS, as it stands, is medically incurable. It is a condition which will go through and nothing can be done about it. There is another myth in there, which I want to wrap in as well, Ken, at the same time. There are myths which go around, and some people say that PPS is a reactivation of the polio virus. That is not true. That is medically not true. And if anybody tells you that, it's not the case. It is not like when you had chickenpox as a child and you get shingles now. That is a reactivation of a chickenpox virus or a derivation of it. But the polio virus does not come back and clobber you again. It can. If you have type 1 polio and you go to a country, you can catch type 3. That's a possibility, but it is not a reactivation. The PPS is not a reactivation. Can anything be done about it? To date, the medical opinion is no. All it can be done is slowed down. They have tried, the Spanish company have tried using immunoglobulins, which are supposedly to slow down the progress of PPS. They tried those. They're $2,000 a shot. You need 6 shots, and it's supposed to last about 3 months. But they've been trying and trying and trying, and they have not found any physical evidence of actually improving it. There are people in Denmark who are saying, yes, it did improve it. And people in Sweden are saying, yes, it did improve it. But when they've actually got down to it, they can find no medical evidence for improvement. The improvement is rather like those persons who unfortunately get multiple sclerosis, who land up going into a hyperbaric chamber, which is an oxygen-rich chamber, and they actually come out feeling a lot better. It is a psychological, and it is a boost which goes through on that. Can you cure it? No. Can you slow it down? Can you work with it? Well, you've got Div there who actually works with it all the time, and he sort of goes out and he does all his running. There are a lot of people who can't do that, and in fact, every single polio patient or every single polio survivor or polio warrior, whatever word you like to use, is different, and because of their differences, they find different solutions actually help them. I went around using what is used, the terminology in America is braces and crutches, calipers and crutches for many, many years, until I got to the stage where I couldn't do it any longer. And I went from being able to get around on braces and crutches in 2004 to being totally confined to a wheelchair 2 years later. So, you get some people where the progression is fast, others where it's very slow. Others, there are a lot of people, remember, who will never get PPS, who are polio survivors. There are, Halstead turns around and says it may be 60%. Richard Bruno sort of goes around about the same things. There are people in Australia who say that it's a lot less, that it may only be about 2%. There is no convergence on what it is. It's not curable, it is manageable. It is rather like some people who get cancer. Their cancer is not curable, but it's treatable.
Thank you, John. So I was also told that there is no medical test to diagnose PPS. Is that a truth or a myth?
Well, Div is the exception. Div is always the exception to these rules. He got the electromyographs, EMGs done and everything else. You can have tests done for that, but the normal run of the mill that you will get from your normal doctor, and especially in places where they don't know about these things, is that they will go through everything else first. I do know there are people who thought I've got PPS, and no, they haven't. They've unfortunately been clobbered by something else. I know people who have actually got tuberculosis of the hip joint, and and they thought it was PPS because they'd had paralytic polio. I know other people who've actually got MS, and there is, as a lot of you may know, there is a link, and there is a lot of people who actually land up thinking I've got PPS, and no, it's not. Unfortunately, they've actually got Parkinson's, and there is actually quite a link between Parkinson's and polio and PPS. So you've got to look at all those things. To get a medical diagnosis by test is extremely unusual. You need to go to a medical specialist or to a neurologist who's interested, and there are few and far between. And bluntly, to say, as I think most of the audience here is probably from the United States, to actually go and have something like that done in the States, I would say is extremely unlikely that you'll get anybody to do it, because there is not enough knowledge in the US about post-polio syndrome. The knowledge exists outside of the US, and is actually in places like Australia, New Zealand, in the European capitals. There are tests, but if you can get them done, you're very fortunate, and most people don't know that they happen. And the other one that actually goes across as well, there is a close link between a condition called hemochromatosis and post-polio syndrome. Hemochromatosis is usually diagnosed as a genetic condition where both parents carry it, and it's an inability of the body to actually process iron and to excrete iron, and you get a buildup, and it can cause liver function problems. But what actually happens is that as when PPS takes over, it can, in some people, cause a change, an organic change in their muscle structure and in their processing structures, and that can land up with a problem. But Dave, I don't know how you managed to do it. I've never managed to get a proper diagnosis done except by going to a post-polio hospital.
So thank you, John. So let's tackle another myth or truth. I've got a friend, and she's a young person being in her 30s, 40s. She has no symptoms. She has polio, or had polio, and she has no symptoms of post-polio syndrome. And she said, should I be worrying about it? Because I've been told it's only something that older people get. Is that a truth or a myth?
It's a myth. It really depends on when you got it. The consensus of opinion when you go through is that post-polio syndrome can occur anything from 15 years onwards from the onset of the acute phase. Now, there are young ones. We have one person in the United Kingdom who has post-polio syndrome diagnosed, and he was sent to Germany for diagnosis, and he's 27. He got polio when he was 6 months old in Syria. There are various other people around. Mostly you will find that because post-polio syndrome did not become a topic of conversation for many, many years and didn't actually get recognized in a lot of countries for many years, and people didn't want to talk about it, that it's mostly the older generation who appear to have it. It starts slowly. When we actually look back, Ken and I were having a conversation yesterday, and my wife was in on it as well, and she turned around and I said, oh, I didn't really get it till so-and-so. And my wife, who is an orthopedic trained practitioner, turned around and said, oh yes, you did. You had it when you were 34. You were dropping things, you were having problems, you were getting things going. It's a matter of recognizing it and seeing when it happens. If you haven't got it and you don't get it, good luck. But be aware that it is always a danger lurking in the background. It is just one of those things that can occur, and it can, as it did with me. I kept on going and kept on going, as I said, until 2004, which is what, call it 20 years ago, when I was in my mid-50s. And then all of a sudden it just really accelerated and I went downhill. But the signs for it were there 20 years earlier.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. So let's tackle this one. Some people say there is a cure or must be a cure for PPS. You've heard things going around about stem cell research and things, scientists talking about the fact that we need to do more research and find that there has to be a cure there somewhere. Is there a cure for PPS? Is that a truth or a myth?
Well, stem cell research has been flavor of the month in a lot of places, and there is an awful lot of things going on. Now, we need to go. Let's go back again. Stem cells are the building blocks of life, and they go through and they can repair things. If you actually go through and you look at it and you say, what is a close analogy to polio? Spinal lesion. A lot of people have spinal lesions. Now, for example, I would imagine most of you, if not all of you, have got fully functioning nerve function. In other words, if you burn yourself, you can feel it. If you burn a bit of yourself, you can feel it. If somebody kicks me in the shin, I can feel it, but I can do damn all about it. I can't kick them back. And you know, there's been all the research being done on stem cells for spinal lesions, and a lot of that money has come out of the Christopher Reeve Foundation, and a lot of people have been working and looking at that. Christopher Reeve, by the way, was the only man ever to have survived a C1 spinal break. He's the only recorded one anyway. Nobody has actually managed to get stem cells, and they've been working on it in Cambridge. They're working on it in Cardiff. They're also working on it in over in California at is it Berkeley in California? I can't remember.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're also working on it in MIT, and they have done some work, and there's some work going on in India as well on stem cells. Nobody has actually has shown any physical proof or medically peer-reviewed proof that anything can be done with stem cells. Now, I know somebody's going to come back at me and say, a few years ago in Hungary, they had a man who had stem cells injected into his spine and they got him up and he was walking. Yes, they did, but a lot of that was actually also done by electrostimulation. In other words, he had electrodes fitted above and below the spinal cord break. And although there was some regenerative growth in the spinal cord, most of it was done by electrostimulation and also by using an exoskeleton.
So John, you're basically not saying that there may be a cure for it, but it hasn't been found yet.
Well, in the same way as you go back into the 1920s, everybody was saying that nobody could stop polio. And then along came some Mr. Salk and Mr. Sabin. And also, we must remember there was Russians involved and a Hungarian involved as well, which did them. And actually, there's a book out which is called Paralyzed with Fear by Professor Gareth Williams. And he was one of the first guinea pig trial people for the injectable version of the vaccine in Queen's University in Belfast. And the way that happened was that they turned around and they said to the teaching authorities, have you got children that, that you'd like to get vaccinated? He was one of the guinea pigs. But he's written an excellent book, which if you can get hold of it, Paralyzed with Fear by Dr. Gareth Williams, read it. It's eye-opening. Okay,
great. Thank you, John. The next point is maybe more of an opinion than anything else, but I know a lot of people have said, and I think you lived an active life, that people say, live your active life, enjoy your life, enjoy every minute of your life. Don't worry about your older years when you're going to get, we may get post-polio syndrome, but continue doing what you're doing and be an A personality and be active. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, there's different opinions on that, and I don't think anybody's right or wrong on it, John. But
No, nobody's right or wrong on it, because we're all different human beings. We're all different people. We've all got different personalities and everything else. I had an extremely active life. I used to travel the world all the time, and I landed up in various places. I actually landed up in Patagonia, of all places, at one stage, where they speak Welsh, by the way, but of all things. But I've traveled all over the world, and I don't regret a thing that I did. I don't regret the falls. I don't regret the damage that I did to myself. I don't regret the fact that I nearly did a traumatic amputation of my arm. Polio doesn't define me. I am who I am. I thoroughly enjoyed my life. I wanted to get on with it. And even though I had the polio, and people kept saying to me, "For God's sakes, John, slow down." I said, "Why? I've only got one life. I want to live it. I want to enjoy it." So I landed up doing what I wanted to do. They told me I couldn't learn to fly. I got a PPL, a private pilot's license. People told me they couldn't do other things. I know of one bloke who was told, "You're an idiot to do it. You can't do any more to yourself." He's a Frenchman. He polio, and he hang glides from his wheelchair. And you know, why not? The only thing about it was when he actually did it, and somebody said to him, "Oh, you're going to kill yourself." He said, "Well, yes, that's a possibility, but anybody can kill themselves hang gliding." They said, "Well, what damage can you do?" He said, "Well, I could break my back, but I would be in no worse condition than I am now." So, you know, it's a matter of, people have to do what they want to do. They've got to live their life. The biggest obstruction I have seen to people with polio and with other neurological, physio-neurological conditions is other people telling them what they can't do. You can't do this, you can't do that. It does turn around to the comment being made, which was made to me many times, even by my father when he was alive. You're just bloody minded. If somebody tells you you can't do it, you get on with it. All right, that's the type A personality. And they say a lot of polios are type A personalities. What I would say is, if you want to enjoy your life, if you've got a life to enjoy, get on and do it. Do I regret a thing I've done? Yeah, maybe a couple, not for putting out on the airwaves. But in my whole life, I would say I've done what I wanted to. Do I regret it? Should I have done otherwise? No, not a thing.
Which is a great philosophy, and I know you and I know others have told me the same thing, though, that at some point when you start to realize the PPS is setting in and you can't do what you wanted to do before, then you have to go for a process of accepting that and dealing with the depression that comes with it.
There are a lot of places. There are some of the groups, certainly in Europe. I don't know about the support groups in the States, but there are support groups which actually encourage and actually will do counseling, because there are a lot of people who get polio or start getting PPS who go into a depression, and it actually goes through something which is akin to a bereavement because they've lost what they had before. Now, yes, I did have that when I got to the stage where I was told by my boss when I was on the main board of a multinational, "Sorry, John, you just can't do it any longer. You can't, your brain's all right, but you've got to get out, you've got to travel, you've got to do this, and you can't do it." So they medically retired me. Well, that was a kick in the teeth. But then you go about, you find something else, and I found a way of rebuilding my life. I went to work, looking after and using the experience and the knowledge I had from company law and contracts and everything else, and actually helping to write the disability laws for the whole of Europe, you know, and going on from there. And you went on from that. And I was, before I was actually involved, I got pulled in with, when they were converting from Chapter 508 to ADA and such like in the States, I got pulled in with part of that process. So you went in and you worked through and you worked through and you worked through. But to be told at the age of 36. Sorry, that's you finished. You may be a director on the main board of a multinational, but you're finished. That's you over. The only thing you can do is get on again, pick yourself up, rebuild a life, change direction. And many people, disabled or not, have to do that every day of the year.
It's a good answer. Good answer, John. So, I mean, basically, and any disability that happens, particularly somebody who acquires a disability, post-polio syndrome is not only a physical adjustment, it's also a mental adjustment to it too. So John, and Francis, we're going to get to your question in a minute. We're going to open it up for discussion. We got a few more truths or myths that we want to go through, and then we'll open it up for discussion. And if anybody has a myth that they want to present to, or truth that they want to present to John, that's fine. If he doesn't have the answer, though I find that hard to believe, he said he will find it and get back to you. We'll do a paper on. So we'll get back to you, Francis, in a minute. Tell me about Dr. Google. Is Dr. Google a good place to go to find more information, to find accurate information about post-polio syndrome? What do you think about Dr. Google?
Anybody who comes to me and talks to me, and anybody else who says, oh, I know all about it, I've Googled it, the first thing I do is hold my head in horror. There is so much wrong on that, on Google. You've got to go, you really, if you want to look up, you've got to go to the medically reviewed, peer-reviewed papers, and you've got to go to places like Carol Ferguson's site, you know, polio survivors serving others. You've got to go and get those ones and go through from there. There is so much wrong in Google about polio and what it doesn't exist, and it's, yeah, I've had that one as well. Coming up in Google with one answer, is polio a real disease? No, it's not. It doesn't exist. It hasn't existed for donkey's years. You know, you get these ones going through. But please, you may use it as a minor reference source to start with, to point you in the right direction. But please go and look at things like the Federations of Neurological Diseases, the PHI, their libraries. Go and research those and get into those ones. Don't use Google, because you're going to get things going wrong. Things like you should exercise hard. Yeah, there are some who can. There are lots who can't. You should exercise hard. You should not do this. You should do that, and everything else. I'm sorry. Personally, I don't believe in taking Google as a definitive reference source.
Okay, thank you. And people say also there are no facilities for PPS, specialized in PPS. Is that true or myth?
There are specialist hospitals in Europe. There's one in Copenhagen, run by Polio Denmark. There's another one, beautiful one, on the lakes. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Italy and up to the lakes in Italy, right on the edge of Lake Garda. They've got the most beautiful hospital there. There is another one in Jansky Lázně in the Czech Republic. There is a unit, the only one left in the UK is down in London, which George knows of, Lane Fox unit. And there are various other hospitals around. There used to be the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Adelaide. They used to run a place as well. And you've got the Duncan Hospital in New Zealand, or the Duncan Foundation in New Zealand. There are ones around and about, but not all over the place.
Okay, thank you, John. I know this is one of your subjects that you post oftentimes on Facebook, but I'm told that there are medical conditions that are brought on by polio, and they're such as Parkinson's disease, deteriorating joints, cancer. Is that a truth or a myth?
Well, there is quite a large number of people who've had polio who get Parkinson's. Nobody actually knows why. All we know is there seems to be a coincidental to it, and it goes through from that. The overall situation is, I don't know whether it is. Does it cause cancer? Not that I would know of. Can you hold 1 second, Ken? I'm not sure what's going on. Somebody's got.
That's fine. And so when John gets back, I'm going to open it up for discussions. And please, Delaware John, if you could kind of monitor that, if you can either put a question in the chat, or you could put up your hand, your virtual hand, and we'll take you in the order that you put it up. So I'm just explaining where we go from here, John.
Yep.
So
It's all right. I heard you. I thought somebody
Okay.
was knocking on my door. People get cancer. If you've had polio, you are subject to, and you will get any other disease that anybody else in the population can get, and it goes through on that basis. If you're going to get cancer, you'll get cancer. If you're going to get a cerebral hemorrhage, you're going to have a stroke, you're going to have one. There is nothing. There are some conditions that seem to go. If you can hear squeaking in the background, that is my West Highland Terrier. Thank you. I think the situation is that we are exactly the same as the normal population. It's just that we've had polio as well.
Okay. Thank you, John, on that. And so I'll open up the questions. Delaware John, can you kind of monitor those questions?
Sure. Frances has her hand up first.
Thank you. I want to provide a counterpoint to some of what we've just heard from John McFarland, who sounds like he's had a very adventurous life, full of testosterone and doing all these wonderful physical activities. But a little background, I had polio right after my 5th birthday. I was hospitalized for 3 months away from my family. This was in Southern California. And I was told I made a complete recovery. I did not, but I tried to behave as if I did. And, I went through school. I did very poorly with athletic skills. I did do okay with academics. I ended up becoming a paralegal, and I worked with lawyers, and that could be considered a sedentary job until you look at the size and the heft of case reporters. And I had to site check the briefs. That was very difficult on my arms. I was very relieved when at age 57, I was put on total and complete disability because I was told my condition, and I had progressively been getting weaker and weaker. And my PPS was diagnosed when I was 49, but I continued to work part-time, full-time, less physically taxing, but it was all too much for me. So at age 57, I was totally and completely disabled, and that was a good thing for me. It's not like I disliked working with lawyers. I actually, it was a good job. It was mentally very stimulating. But I want to compare some of what was said by John McFarland, do as much as you can, as when you can, with what happened when I lived in San Francisco from 1980 to 1986. The AIDS epidemic was raging. People were dying left and right. And it wasn't until later that drugs were presented, probably by Dr. Fauci, that enabled some of these people with AIDS to actually live. But a friend of mine who is a gay man, I think he had a devil-may-care attitude. And because he saw people dying all around him, I think he was living for now. And he actually never contracted AIDS, but he became impoverished. He was spending money, living for now, and his reserves were depleted, and he ended up having to, when he lost his job when he was in his early 60s, he had to move in with family in another state, leaving San Francisco, which is, as many of you may know, is a wonderful place to live. So, I use that analogy as we basically have to consider what the future holds for us, and we have to live accordingly. And if that means scaling back and not going on as many adventures, I think we need to do that.
Thank you. One question in the chat is maybe for John. Does post-polio syndrome shorten a person's lifespan?
The oldest post-polio I know of is 102. No, it does not seem to. There's no medical evidence for it. It's more of lifestyle. If you smoke too much, drink too much, carry too much weight, you know, that's liable to do it a lot more. Post-polio is not shown to cause any problem of that. In fact, one of the bits I asked a doctor about once, I said, does it cause heart problems? He said, not that we know of.
Right. Well, it caused heart problems in my situation because I had an undiagnosed sleep apnea, which is common in polio survivors. So there are issues that can cause it, but you have to be aware. And like you said, John, you have to be aware of your own situation. Maureen, go ahead. Unmute yourself, please.
This has been awesome. I love it. And thank you, John. You've got a wealth of information all bottled up there. I don't exactly know how to phrase this without whatever. Does traumatic events exacerbate post-polio? Head-on collision accidents, divorce, deaths, you know, family deaths and stuff like that. Does that like I said, exacerbate it? Because in 2016, my husband and I, he's also a polio survivor, we were in a head-on collision on I-95, if those of you who are aware of that crazy road. And the next day, my husband was unable to walk a short distance, and I really mean a short distance from the handicap parking into the hospital, where I was with a fractured C2, and I had a non-displaced femur fracture as well. And now he's not able to stand up. I know it's been many years now, but he was never able to stand up straight again after that accident. And of course, they found a little fracture, in a compressed fracture in his lower spine. But, you know, even with that, and now we're in chairs, I think because of that, that still doesn't keep us down. I mean, if somebody told me back when I was in my 30s and 40s, I was a single mom, and somebody said, oh, Maureen, you better slow down, blah, 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 because of post-polio, I would have looked at them and I went, no way, I have a child to take care of, and, you know, going to sports and all of that thing. I wouldn't have listened. So I get it. But specifically, I'm wrapping it. So specifically, does trauma exacerbate post-polio? Thank you.
Richard Bruno has written about it. The answer is, I don't know. There is a suspicion that when I did a near traumatic amputation of my right arm, when I turned the wheelchair over and I got trapped, that might have started it. I was coming out of it. I'd been doing a lecture to doctors in London, and I came out and I went to go down the curb in my manual wheelchair because I had about some distance to go back to the railway station, pothole under the curb, wheelchair hit the pothole, turned, I put my arm out to save myself, and it got caught between the wheelchair, the curb, and that was that. I landed up in hospital for 9 months. But the situation is, I don't know. The only thing I can do is let me look at it and we'll come back to you.
Thank you. George Allen, unmute yourself and go for it.
How many times are I going to win?
George, you're still muted. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah,
There you go.
I made it. John,
Go for
yeah, you talked about doing as much as you can, but there is this slogan that's used now for people with PPS, and that's don't listen to your physio who says use it or lose it, but rather conserve to preserve. So while people should be taking exercise, there is a time when you do too much, and then you suffer from it. So you've got to get the right balance between doing what you really want to do, but admitting your body's telling you what you can't.
Yes, you've got to listen to what your body says, and there's also excellent booklets and pamphlets and papers out about exercise and pacing yourself. Don't overdo it. Every one of us is different. We are all different in what we can do. We've got people who buck the trend, who can go and do all sorts of things. I know of one person who actually rows in a double scull boat, and he's in there, and he does competitive rowing, and he goes along, and he can actually do it because the one arm, he uses the arm which he can use, the other one just more or less follows it through. But you just don't know. You've got to listen to what you can, listen to yourself, listen to your own body, what you can do and how you can do it. There is no point in knocking yourself out and trying to prove that you're Superman if you're not, or Superwoman. Sorry, super person. Must get it right these days. There's no point in trying to prove that. If you can't, if it's not possible to do it, even if you want to do it, just listen to what your body tells you. It's the same way for any human being. Do what your body tells you to do. If it says rest, people say, oh, you're going to go and rest and you're going to go to sleep. That is a restorative process, and it's what your body is requiring you to do.
Okay, thank you. There's a person, Maure 2468, that is having trouble raising their hand. Go ahead.
Yes, this is me. Sorry. My hand keeps falling off. Okay, this is Liliana Goldman. And yes, I had polio when I was 6 months old. And I'm 70 now. I still managed to walk without any help, but my PPS is getting worse, and soon I will need to walk with a walker for safety more than for walking. But my questions are, all through my life, as I saw PPS progressing slowly or rapidly when I broke my right femur and I couldn't use the leg, one of the muscles completely atrophied. So they keep telling me, people without knowledge, they tell me, keep exercising, you will rebuild your muscle. Is that true or false?
I
have more questions.
Oh, right. Okay. The quick answer is, because of the way that PPS works, once again, I'm going to go back to the acute polio phase. Your motor neurons die. They're ones which go to various places in your body, and they actually die off. Now, what then happens is quite often is that the nerves alongside those muscles where the motor neurons have gone will spread, they will branch out, and they will take over. And what then happens after 15, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever it might be, when the PPS starts, those nerves which have branched out, in basic terms, say, I'm tired, I can't do anymore, I'm overstretched, and they die. So if you lose those motor neurons, it doesn't matter how much you exercise that muscle or try to do it. If there's no motor neurons there to actually fire the muscle, it's not going to make any difference.
Okay, you give me peace of mind. Thank you.
Okay.
I do have, particularly, I'm sorry, I'm going to cry.
It's okay.
fatigue spells. Is that part of PPS where I need, my body tells me, Lily, today, lie down and read.
If you get, listen to your body. Listen, a lot of, I'm seeing nods going around, and you know, a lot of people with PPS get fatigue. I get tired. It doesn't matter. Everybody says you seem to keep going all the time. Yes. Sometimes you have to be a pretty good actor. I can see Dick grinning his head off down at the bottom. But you have to be a pretty good actor. You get tired, you will be fatigued, you will find that it happens. But also just remember, you're actually younger than I am. But also remember that as we age, we will tire more anyway. It is part of the natural process that goes on. As we all get older, and as people get older, they tire more easily. So what you're doing is you're putting a level on top of a level. So you've got to look at it that way.
Thank you. Bob, you're next.
Thank you. John, following on from, I guess, myths and truths around 2 and 3, where it was discussed that PPS is by exclusion after a battery of tests and running around with different doctors, etc. One of the things that has interested me these last couple of years, and I heard a bit of a twang to it last night, is that in some cases, and this is the question, can post-polio, apart from, say, lupus or other things where people think it's similar to, can it be misdiagnosed? For example, are people out there being diagnosed with CIDP when really they should be being diagnosed with PPS?
We're getting people diagnosed with ME. We're also getting some people diagnosed with I don't know whether you call it the same in Australia or not, motor neurone disease, or as they call it in the States, ALS. We're getting people diagnosed with that. Yes, they are, and we're also getting people diagnosed wrongly with fibromyalgia. So it does get misdiagnosed, and it's a matter of going through. And the unfortunate thing is that 9 times out of 10, it's then the patient who has to go back and prove the doctor wrong, as opposed to the other way around.
So this is not being tracked globally then, as a percentage of all of the hundreds of thousands who may have PPS in the world. We don't know if there's more because of X.
No, it's not being tracked globally. I can see John's agreeing with me. Delaware John, that is agreeing. It's not being tracked globally. We wish to God it would be. And really, what I would like to be able to do is hammering one of the universities which deals with, or medical centres who deal with it in Europe, and see if they can put a couple of PhD students onto it and see what we can do on it. But at the moment, no luck.
Great.
All right. Cheers.
We have the last 2 questions. It is in the chat. Is there a test to confirm that someone has actually had polio?
We've had this one all over the place. The titter test, and it's a test which can be done, and in basic terms, if you don't have to do it, don't do it. It's extremely uncomfortable. You basically have a lumbar puncture. And what then happens is that the spinal fluid can be analyzed to look for the genome fragments from the polio virus in the spinal fluid. If you don't need to do it, don't. Anybody, you've had it done, I know, John. I think I've had it done. It's not nice. It's far from nice.
My older brother was never confirmed that he had polio, but that's really the only way I could have gotten polio, because I was only 10 months old. I want him to have the test so I can blame him, but it's too invasive of a thing. The next question is, I have taken a couple of cortisone shots due to pain. One doctor told me they will atrophy your muscles. Any knowledge about that?
No, but we'll look into it.
Okay. And we do have one last question. Barbara Myers, unmute yourself and go for it. And then we have to wrap up. You're still muted, Barbara. And I can't, there you go. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I ask this question every time I'm with somebody who mentions Parkinson's. I have had 4 children. My oldest daughter has Parkinson's, and I always want to know if there's connection between me having polio, her getting Parkinson's. I know she was given, my gosh, I took all my kids down to get that live vaccine when it came out because I thought I'm not going to let any of my children go through all of this. I'm just looking to see what you know about that.
The only Parkinson's I know of are in polio patients. I do not know, and it's the same question has been asked in other areas. Can people get polio because their parents had polio, etc.? And no, the answer is Parkinson's sits out on its own. It goes through. It is a neurological. You have to look at the epidemiology of it, and there is a coincidental epidemiology with polio patients, but I do not know of polio patients or polio survivors having children that have landed up with Parkinson's. I've got the one absolute prime example of a situation where people say, "Oh well, you must have got polio because your mother had polio when she was pregnant," and such like. I know of one case, one lady up in Dublin who I know of. She was actually born inside the iron lung when her mother was being treated. So, and she is perfectly well and actually landed up competing for the Irish team in the Olympics in Sydney.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you both Johns for your help on this. And we appreciate all you coming to this meeting. As an advocacy group again, it's important we get the information correct. One of our missions is to make sure that the information out there about post-polio syndrome is correct. And we will continue with that mission. In many different directions. We're certainly concerned about the media and making sure they get the information correct, but many other different directions also. So for the next 2 months, for November, December, we normally have 2 meetings a month. One is a speaker meeting and the other is a general discussion meeting. This is the general discussion meeting. We are going to only have the speaker meetings for the next 2 months, and those will be the second 2 Thursdays of the month. I think November is somebody can help me out. The second Thursday is November. I don't want to give the wrong date. Does somebody have a calendar in front of them? No. Okay, November
17th.
No. Second Thursday. The second Thursday.
November 10th.
November 10th. Okay, so that'll be our next meeting.
Sorry.
We'll be announcing that the speaker shortly on that. We also have started working on some committees. We're going to get back to those committees soon. We realized that we were a little bit putting the expression cart before the horse. So we needed to, as a steering group committee, make some decisions on our mission and our mission statement before we went too far ahead in too many directions, and that's a healthy thing to do. So we will be meeting as a steering committee in November, but we will have the committees go back to the committees in November for those of you who are on committees. Once again, if you have any further, our role again is to make sure information is correct. If you hear miss or you have some concerns about some things that are being said, please write to us. We're at ppsadvocacy@gmail.com. and we will get you the right answers. I think, John, maybe after this, we'll put out a paper on this and make sure it's available to people. They can use it. I appreciate it again, everybody. And nice to see you all. And we hope to see you all in a few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much.